I sincerely apologize for my lack of ability, as well as all the comments that I have made that have had negative effects.
Let's combine all our efforts and make regime change come true.
Okay, the race is on. Many of the opposition Democrats are, of course, former members of the LDP, or their fathers, or their grandfathers, or their forefathers might have been members of the LDP, which has ruled Japan, except for, what, a few months here and there ever since WW2. We'll have to see if the Democrats' expected victory in upcoming August vote changes the landscape at all. Talk about things moving. It's like a 20-ton tanker moving very slowly. Yes, we can. Japanese style, the opposition extending their poll lead over the embattled LDP in the lead up to the August 30 general vote. Francis here with more on what voters are really hankering for. Yes, we can. But the big question, Fran, yes, we can what?
Exactly, Bernie. Politicians are going through the test to regain voter trust that they've lost through numerous scandals before giving them the power to return around the economy.
Japan is thirsting for political change, but drowning in a political quagmire. Torn between a governing party plagued by scandal and an opposition virtually untried in half a century.
Corporate managers, entrepreneurs, and even consumers have long given up on believing that politics can actually do anything good.
They certainly haven't done the recessed economy much good, and there's little separating the policies of both major parties. Cash handouts to stimulate spending, the order of the day on both sides of politics. The vote in August may come down to which career politician can whittle away voter apathy.
If a DPJ victory leads the public here to have to be more optimistic about their own country's future and their own future, their own personal future, that will tap into and unleash a lot of forces that have been suppressed here.
Hatoyama's pedigree is as unquestioned in Japan as Kennedy is in America. He's a fourth-generation politician. Like also his grandfather, a former prime minister, his seat in parliament inherited. If Hatoyama, the country's richest parliamentarian, unseats Aso, that'll make 4 different prime ministers in less than 4 years. It's little wonder that the Japanese have lost faith not only in the government of the day, but perhaps the government per se.
Bernie, so despite the lead the DPJ is enjoying, the voters are not impressed with the poster boys. A majority of respondents said that neither Yukio Hatoyama or Taro Aso is qualified to be the next prime minister. Bernie, back to you.
So change whatever. We're not sure about these two guys, but we need some kind of change. Beyond that, we're not really sure what we want. Stephen Roach, Morgan Stanley Asia chairman. This is a country. I'm not going to ask you to put the odds on the vote, but this is a country in decline. It's getting older and older. Within the next 40 or 50 years, there's going to be like 3 working people supporting every 1 retiree or some god-awful
Oh, look, they've hit
ratio.
a demographic wall. You're right. But, you know, when you think about it, Japan is pretty much like, you know, every other country, Bernie. The economy is going to be down on a GDP basis this year 6 or 7%. And it's an unbelievable contraction. So the Japanese voter, feeling the pressure of the worst recession since the mid-'70s, says, okay, throw the guys out. We want change. We don't really know what change is, but what we know is that we're going through an economic hardship that the current leadership deserves some responsibility for. So we're prepared to try somebody else. And that happens everywhere. It happens in the United States. It happens in Germany. It happens in France. It happens in Italy, of course, every week. It happens in the UK. And Japan is just like the rest of the world in that respect.
Would it be far-fetched for me to suggest that Japan is nothing more in many ways than a much more developed version of China? You know, they do have social issues there. They've got a domestic populace which isn't really doing its part in many ways. They're still in largely export-driven. I mean, Japan equals China, doesn't it?
They have similar structures if you look at the various sectors of their GDP. You know, since the turn of the century, just to pick a year, since the year 2000, the biggest impetus in the Japanese economy has come from exports. The internal private consumption share has been stagnant, and this export-led economy got creamed with a massive external demand shock when its big markets around the world went into recession. The difference between Japan and China, of course, is that both economies are export-led. Both got hit with these external demand shocks. But China had this monster cushion growing at 12% in the 3 years before the subprime crisis. Japan was a 2% grower. So it literally collapsed. GDP was down double-digit rates, 12 to 13%, fourth quarter of last year, first quarter of this year. So it's getting better. The rates of decline are moderating, but the last time I checked, through May, exports, which is the engine of Japan, were still down 40% year on year.
Well, if times are down, people just aren't going to spend, even if they do have a replacement demand.
Yeah, and the Japanese consumer has always been a saver, reluctant to spend, limited square footage in the humble abode. So, this is not a thriving consumer culture, even in its best of days.
Yeah, they like little gadgets, but there is a lot of self-imposed austerity. I better get to some of the questions coming from our viewers, otherwise I'll never get to them because there's so many of them because you're such a popular guy, you know that. Martin writes in, your thoughts on India in relation to China? We love to bang the BRIC countries together. You think India might be a better bet in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic on India, Bernie. I actually, of all the major economies that I spend time in around the region week after week, India's gotten me the most intrigued and constructive going forward. Three legs to the stool, micro, macro, and politics. The micro, number of companies, the workforce, the markets, the financial institutions, has always been good. The macro has been lousy, but it's now getting better. Savings rates are up. Foreign direct investment has accelerated a lot into India. Infrastructure is still a problem, but I'm hopeful it will get better. And politics, the government now has a clean shot at doing reforms now that the communists are no longer in the coalition. So you've got, the stars coming into the right alignment, and that's very constructive for India, Martin.
Okay, the different pillars that are determinants of success there. India. Stephen Roach likes India. We'll be back with Stephen from Morgan in a little bit.